Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Brooke, and I am back with another interesting, long, very crazy story about another murder that happened in PEI. So, this video is about a man named Ernest DeRoche. He was from a small little settlement in PEI called St. Roch. And now that settlement, that place in PEI was considered one of the safest places in Canada. Or was it? Now, this story also involves a family, the Ellesworth family. Now, this family consisted of two families put together. It was two sisters, Bernadette Ellesworth and Gloria Ellesworth, and their husband. Now, Bernadette's husband's name was Ivan, and then Gloria's husband's name was Ronald. Now, Gloria was currently pregnant at this time with her second child, and they also had a daughter named Cheryl. Now, Bernadette and Ivan, they had three children, an infant son named Sean. They had a 4-year-old daughter, and her name was Janine, and they had a 1-year-old daughter, and her name was Krista. Now, this community was such a nice, quiet community. Everybody was very kind to one another. They got along. But there was this one man that always caused trouble, made people feel uncomfortable, and his name was Ernest. Now, Ernest became the local peeping Tom. Now, he would stalk people. He would follow them to their houses. He would peep in their windows and make everybody just feel uncomfortable, but he didn't stop there. He would actually go into people's yards in broad daylight, and he would steal their underwear off their clotheslines. So the community just began to just get really uncomfortable with him. He wouldn't stop. They feared him, and eventually he started getting a reputation about being a moonshiner. Now, he would use an old outbuilding that was on the back of his family's farm for his production of moonshine. And like I said, he was a local peeping Tom, but he had this weird fetish, especially about the neighbors. He would sneak onto their yard and he would watch them through the windows. And not only that, he would watch their children, and it made them so uncomfortable. So like I said, the community, it was a really close-knit community. Nobody was bad. So Ernest's behavior, it really stood out to everybody. So the police, they always kept their eyes on Ernest. And in 1971, he was actually arrested, and he was charged with possession of stolen property. So after serving a year in prison, he was soon after that, he was arrested again for trespassing and served another year in prison. So a little while after he was released, the RCMP actually went back to his house with an arrest warrant for illegal production of liquor. So Constable Hart Eastman, him and his partner were actually the police officers that went there, and they went and knocked on all the doors, and it seemed like no one was home. So they made their way around the property, and they came across the building in the outback. And when they arrived there, the door was locked, so they found an old axe, and they broke into it. And they seen that the machines that he was using were still on. And not only that, they seen a gun leaning against one of the walls there. And they later came to find out that Ernest had escaped through a little hatch that he had just before they arrived. Well, as time went on, his reputation got worse. His peeping got worse, everything. He didn't care if it was men or women or children. He would do it anyways. And then people got so afraid of him, they stopped actually calling him by his name. They would call him the Crow because it signified that it was a bad omen and it was an omen of death. And that's how they looked at him. So people, they would never file complaints against him. They were worried about how he would react and what he just might do. And eventually, one family just got sick of it, and that was the Ellesworth family. Now, they finally were the only ones in the community that was brave enough to call the RCMP and report what exactly he was doing, that he was peeping in on people and stealing their underwear and making them feel uncomfortable, and especially watching their children. Shortly after the report, Ernest was arrested. The police caught him, and he didn't stay in custody long. And once he was released from custody, he was just bottled with anger because he was sick and tired of being put in jail over and over and over. So once he was released, he just had his mind set on one thing, that he was going to find out who put him in jail, who filed the complaint, and he was going to seek revenge on them. After doing some digging and some crying, he eventually learned that it was the Ellsworth family that had called the police, and they were the reason that he was sent to prison. Now, for some reason, this made him even more angrier, and he resented the fact that it was actually his neighbors that called the police on him. So he was getting angrier and angrier by the minute. So he went home and he started drinking his liquor, and he just was bottling everything up to the point where he came up with this plan, what he was going to do to get back at them. So it was February 21st, 1974, and it was said to be a cold, icy night. So Ernest, he decided that he couldn't take it anymore, and he bundled up and he went out his door and he headed across the field towards the Ellsworth house. So inside the house, the Ellsworth house, it was a quiet, peaceful night, and Ivan Ellsworth, he was there in the living room just relaxing. And the two sisters, they were actually gone to church for a bingo night with their friends. So holding the gun, Ernest, he walked straight up to the front door of the Ellsworth house, and he checked to see if the door was locked, and it wasn't. So he turned the doorknob and he barged right in. So doing this, of course, he startled Ivan, and he immediately looked at him and he demanded that Ivan tell him where Gloria's husband Ronald was. Now, out of fear, he was scared to say anything. He was scared he was going to say the wrong thing and he could get shot, or if he told him, his family would get hurt. So this angered Ernest to the point where he shot his gun twice. Now, he shot it the second time because he didn't actually see where he shot. So after shooting Ivan, Ernest, he was just not in the right mind state. He was pacing the floors to the point where he just figured that he would go to the back room of the house and actually hide in the closet. So once returning home, the sisters, they walked into the house, and immediately Bernadette sees her husband lying on the floor, and she starts screaming at her sister that he must be having a heart attack, that she's gonna call 911, right? So she goes over to the phone, and when she looks back at her husband, she notices that there's a bunch of blood on the floor. So scared, she figured, okay, well, he was shot, but who shot him? Now, while this is happening, Gloria, she was running to the back room to bring her jacket to her room. And meanwhile, at the front door, one of their neighbors, Jean, she appeared because she heard a bunch of ruckus, and she heard 2 shots that were fired in the house. So, of course, she just wants to go over and make sure everyone's okay, right? Now, at the time that Ivan got shot, Ronald heard the ruckus that was going on. He heard the gunshots, and he quickly took his child, and he got out of the house. So getting back to Gloria, she was in her room, and she was taking her jacket off. And as she was doing this, she glared over to her closet, and she seen Ernest standing in the doorway of her closet. And she didn't have any time to react or do anything, because Ernest, he just jumped out of the closet and he shot her 5 times, okay? And one of the bullets actually went into her side, and it lodged itself into her spine. So before poor Gloria was actually shot, Jean had her back to the bedroom, so she couldn't see the bedroom. Bernadette was facing the bedroom, and she looked scared, and she looked at Jean, and she whispered, "Go get help, like now, like immediately, go get help." So Jean thinks that Bernadette must have actually seen Ernest in the bedroom with Gloria. Poor Gloria, she's left severely injured on the floor, and she's just bleeding out. Meanwhile, Bernadette, she heard the gunshots, and at a shock, like, she didn't know what to do, so she just laid herself by her husband, because he was still alive, and he was bleeding out on the floor, and I guess just her instinct was to protect him. Bernadette literally, she watched as Ernest came out of the back room and headed towards her. And as he was getting closer, he raised his gun and he was pointing it towards her. And all she could say to him was, "Why are you doing this? Like, what did we do to you?" And his response was shooting her. He literally didn't give her the courtesy of even telling her why in his mind he thought he needed to do that. After shooting Bernadette, he then felt the need to strip them all and discard them of their undergarments. So just as he was about to leave, he noticed Bernadette and Yvonne's 2 children, or 2 other children, a 1-year-old Krista and 4-year-old Janine. And he then went over to them and beat them with the blunt end of his gun. Remember Jean, she left to go get help. She ended up calling the police, and she returned to the house with her husband. Now, when they returned to the house, they actually ran into Ernest. And as soon as he seen them, he raised his gun to them. But Jean's husband said to him, "Ernie, like, you don't have to hurt any more people. You've done enough," kind of thing. And Ernest actually just walked away from them. And it was actually later revealed that Ernest actually ran out of bullets. He had no more bullets in the gun. So thankfully, that was the reason why they weren't shot. And Jean and her husband, they ran into the house, and they seen Bernadette and Yvonne's lifeless bodies on the living room floor. And Jean's first reaction was she was going to go throughout the house and see if anybody else was okay, or if anyone was okay. So she runs to the back room where Gloria was, and she's seeing Gloria on the floor, and she was gasping for air. And then she goes to the children's bedroom, and she finds Krista and Janine severely beaten. Like, the 1-year-old, she actually got it worse. She was beaten to the point where her eyes were swollen shut, and, like, she was really, really fighting for her life. But she did, thankfully, make a full recovery. So after Ernest returned home, his mother looked at him and she asked where he was for the last hour, that she was worried. And his response was actually, "I was hunting for humans." So remember the 2 police officers that were mentioned earlier, Hart Eichmann and his partner. They were actually the officers that night on duty. So when they got the call that Ernest was involved in another incident, the partner automatically said, "Well, it's probably just a prank call or whatever." And Hart, he actually said to him, like, when it involves Ernest, it's never a prank call. We have to, like, follow up on this. So 5 hours after the incident happened, they went to Ernest's house to arrest him. And when they arrived there, he was actually in his room, on his bed, wearing children's underwear. But he wasn't just wearing children's underwear. He was actually wearing 12 pairs of women's underwear. And 2 of the pairs were actually Bernadette's and Gloria's, and they were the ones that they were wearing. So remember I said PEI is just this peaceful, tiny, beautiful island. So when headlines hit the newspapers that 2 are dead, 2 are injured in a West Prince shooting area, everyone was baffled. Like, this doesn't happen here. Like, what's going on? Gloria, she survived being shot 5 times. And it's so sad because a month after the shooting, she actually lost her baby. So actually in total, 3 people lost their lives, and it took Gloria a year and a half to even try to remotely recover from this incident. Like, she was left paralyzed from the neck down. Her whole life has changed. She not only just lost her sister, she lost her brother-in-law, she lost important people in her family, and now she can't even walk. Like, it's just a sin. So 24 hours after being arrested, Ernest, he admitted to his crimes, and he described in great detail everything that he had did. And the way that he described it was very chilling, and it was clinical, and he showed absolutely no remorse. So 4 months after the incident happened, they went to court finally, and Ernest was charged with first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 20 years. So he was then transported to Dorchester Prison in New Brunswick, and this man, he did not give up. He, soon after arriving, started plotting to escape. So on October 8th in 1980, he made friends with 2 inmates in there that were also in there for murder, and they decided that they were going to saw through the bars. They then made homemade knives and waited for the guards to go on their nightly watches. So the 2 officers that were actually on duty was Leroy Brown and Bill Morrison, and they were doing their rounds around 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. So once they seen the officers, the 3 inmates actually jumped to them, and they wrote a list of demands that they wanted. So it actually said on the note that the officers would suffer if they were not supplied with food and drugs. Now, this is weird because if you're in a hostage situation and you're only asking for food and drugs, and they didn't even list what kind of drugs or what kind of food they wanted. They had negotiators come in and try to talk to them, but the 3 inmates would not communicate with them unless it involved what they wanted on the list. So 3 days go by and no food was supplied to the cell block. And the 2 officers, of course, they're starting to feel desperate, like, what are we going to do kind of thing, right? And everything that was going on, it was all over the media, okay? And the 3 inmates, they were getting frustrated because what was being said on the media, a lot of the facts weren't right. So they actually wrote in a letter, another letter, what they wanted to be actually said on the media, and they were going to make Leroy Brown and Bill Morrison say it. And after they did that, it took a while, but they still didn't read it, and they were starting to get angrier by the minute. So the 2 officers, they're just like, I'm done with this. So they finally tried to escape, and they were actually able to overpower the 3 inmates, and they were able to call out for help. And the 2 officers, they actually started climbing the ladder to get to the next landing in this next cell block. And during that, after calling up for help, the emergency response team, they rushed in and they just took control of the hostage situation. But unfortunately, in all the ruckus, one officer, he was told to fire warning shots to the inmates. So, of course, he put his gun up and he fired a couple shots. And it's just out of bad luck. As Bill Morrison was climbing the ladder and he was on the landing, he was actually hit with one of the gunshots in the abdomen. And he was rushed to the hospital, but he unfortunately did not make it. So the 3 inmates, they were then transferred to Kingston Prison in Ontario. It was around the end of 1980. And something that's just baffling, during Ernest's time there in Ontario, he was actually able to have escorted releases, meaning he could go out, run errands, he could go to the shops. As long as a police officer was with him, he was allowed to do that. And he went out probably 6 times a year. So in the amount of time that he actually was in prison there, he was able to go out to the public 180 times because they felt that he was not a risk to the community. And in 1994, his parole was denied again because he was still showing no remorse. And when they even mentioned the Ellesworth family, he would say that it was their fault that it happened. And he denied any treatment that they were trying to give him. So he was showing no communication at all. Now, in an interview that Gloria did, she said that time heals and that she misses her sister and she wishes that she could get her back, but she knows that she can't. And she even said that she doesn't hate Ernest. She pities him. She feels bad for him. And Gloria, she became an inspiration to the community. Was such a loving, she's a beautiful, kind person. And they actually did a fundraiser to build her a house that was wheelchair accessible and was easier for her. And as for the kids, her kids now have children of their own, and Krista and Janine, they also have children of their own, and they're saddened. Of course they'd be saddened. They want to know why and what they could have did to prevent it, but it's something in the past, and unfortunately it can't be fixed. I wish that it could be for them. So at the age of 74, Ernest actually died in prison of natural causes. So that's all I have for you guys. So make sure you like this video and you subscribe to me. Let's be friends. And I will be back in a few days with another video. Make sure you guys like this, alright? Love you all so much.